Alright, welcome back. So I've got this driver's side fender pulled off, and the previous owner couldn't get it off. You remember I showed you this trim was all torn up, and all it really was this bolt was hidden on the inside. It's kind of hard to get to. It's a little tricky to get to, and they just couldn't find it. They got that bolt out, and then there's just a ton more down here, and then all the way to the front. And with the fender off, I found some not so great rust repair. It looks like these quarters, or rockers, or whatever you want to call them, have been replaced, and the work is not excellent. It's not the worst, it's not the best. And I've started pulling this other fender off, and this fender was actually tack welded right here, and I had to bust the tack welds, and it's been under all the paint and stuff. So I was kind of wondering why it was welded and if it's supposed to be. I have no idea if it is or not. And there's some Bondo or filler in this corner here and here. So it's had some work done. Like I said, the car's not pristine. So I've got every bolt out of this fender except this one. It's temporarily back in just to hold it in place. And this trim up here is part of the fender, so it just comes off with it. And what I have discovered is, it's kind of dark over here, so it's going to be hard to see, but under here at the pinch weld, there's no bolts. There's no way that this gets held in. It's kind of a U shape, and it looks like it slides up over the pinch weld of the rocker to hold it in place. Well, I've tried and tried and tried, and I finally figured out that someone has welded this fender in at the bottom. I don't know if it's plug welded or spot welded or what, but it is definitely welded in place. And like I said, it's too dark, but you can see spots where it's been welded in. So unfortunately, just like somebody else had to do on the other side, looks like I'm going to have to get the grinder back out and cut the front fenders off, because, you know, why not? There you go. That's the driver's side where it's been cut off before. So that's what I'm about to do. So if you know about MGs, this will be something normal to you, but this is the front suspension. You've got a lower A-arm, an upper A-arm. You don't have any ball joints. You have this setup. I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but you have a pivot this way, top and bottom, and then you have a pivot this way, top and bottom. And I got a feeling it's all got bronze bushings or something in it. But there are no conventional linear shocks. This is your shock absorber up here. Now this is a rotary damper, and this is pretty uncommon, and it's kind of neat. It has the same setup in the rear. Instead of a regular linear shock, it's got a link, like a sway bar link, like this right here, that runs up, and then this is mounted to the frame, and it's got a little arm on it. But that is your shock absorber on these cars. And it's kind of like a typical car will have a linear shock absorber, which is just a tube and a shaft in it, which is just like this steering damper on this motorcycle. But then this style, this is a rotary damper. Now, this is another steering damper, but this is the style. It's got a lever arm in here that moves back and forth, and this has oil and valving in it, and you can adjust it. You know, most shocks are not this way. And this MG, I think, to my knowledge, is one of the only cars to use a rotary damper, which is kind of cool. And I'm going to leave this front end the way it is for now, the front suspension at least. But in the future, I may change it out. But that is yet to be seen. I got some crazy ideas in my head on some stuff I want to build for it. But I need to get this engine in, get this car running and driving before I let any of those crazy ideas take over. Because I tend to snowball stuff. And if I don't get it running and driving, it'll be a project that never gets finished. So let's get to work on this thing. Oh yeah, look at this. I found some more nice stuff hiding underneath that fender. Man, don't you just love this stuff? Isn't this fun? So this is the driver's side front fender, and you can see this trim line here below it has been replaced with a repop panel, I guess, and it's been welded in here. You can actually see that from the outside because they didn't do a very good job. And then this brace has been cut in half and re-welded in, and that looks like the exact same piece. So I don't know why they would have done that, but You have no idea with these old cars that you get the quality of work until you take them apart, and that's what I'm figuring out. I got the other fender off, and it's been sectioned lower. There's that trim line. This one's been sectioned about halfway down, and I couldn't tell it from the outside, so it wasn't obvious, but it is now. So these fenders are trash. They are unbelievably heavy. I had no idea how heavy they were going to be till I got them off, but they're 2 to 3 times heavier than I expected. And I guess it's just the gauge of steel they used, because I don't see any reason for them to be that heavy. And it's just ridiculous. But probably going to regret this, but I'm going to go ahead and chop the rest of this front end off, because all that's holding it on is this little section here and here on both sides. And it's really going to be in the way when I start putting in these motor mounts and welding them in. So I can always weld it back in if I want later, but this stuff is so flimsy anyway that I'm just going to get it over with. Safety first, or second, or somewhere. Interesting. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. That's a lot easier to work on now. Just cut the front off of every car. Probably wouldn't have done that if the previous owner hadn't have done all this already, but it's what we got to work with. So these two big mounting points on the back of this engine use a 10mm bolt to the bike frame. And this is a 10mm pin. Well, it's a 394 pin. And look at that precision fit. I guess Yamaha just doesn't want to have to spend the money to actually put precision holes in the frame and engine lined up. So I am not happy with that. So I'm going to go to a 7/16, which is 4375. So this is a 436 pin, and it is a nice snug fit. I may end up having to drill or ream these out a few thou bigger, but bolts usually come a few thou undersized, so I'm hoping the bolts I'll order will be a nice fit. But I just wasn't going to be happy with that sloppy of a fit. So this car is there's nothing metric on this car anyway because it's British. So everything on this is obviously metric. These are 10 mil. These are 10 mil. But I'm just not going to be happy with that loose of a fit. So this thing's going to be a hodgepodge of metric, standard, British, whatever British standard or whatever it is. I honestly don't know. So this is where the engine was mounted in the last video. And if you remember, I have some interference right here, which first I was going to use this and create a motor mount right here to stabilize the engine, but then I kind of decided I didn't like that idea. For one, when the engine grows with heat, it's got to move a little bit, and two, that's where the gas pedal pivot point is. So I was just going to create a lot more work that I didn't want to have to deal with. So what I went ahead and did was I moved the engine, and here's the new location compared to the old location. It's rotated slightly around the countershaft sprocket, and it is pushed rearward slightly. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit. But that created some different problems, and I will show you what I mean by that. With the original engine, we look at it straight on forward. you have room for this bolt to clear this subframe mounting bolt and nut here. No problem at all. Well, with the new location, you can see it's moved down and there's going to be some interference, and that's quite a long bolt, and you can't really slide it rearwards because you're going to have the same interference with the firewall here, and if you try to slide it forwards, it's going to hit here. So there is an easy solution for this I came up with. Let me turn it on. These are the new motor mounts. Basically, the upper mount is just slotted. So when I put the engine in place, I'm going to have the bolt in the engine with the nut on the back, but not tight. And I'm going to drop the engine down, straight down. So it'll start a little bit higher, drop right in, and then once it's seated down in the bottom of this pocket, we'll call it, then you can put the lower bolt in. And that should work fine. With the lower bolt in, the upper's not going to be able to go anywhere. It'll still clamp up, and I think it's going to not be an issue at all. But you have to think about stuff like this when you're putting these weird engines in chassis they weren't designed for. And that's the great thing about modeling all this on the computer, is you can see these kind of interferences ahead of time. I also went ahead and scanned the throttle bodies because I didn't have a scan of them before. So if we find them over here, we can turn those on. So there's the throttle bodies, and I left them in color because why not? So there they are. And the next issue I knew I was going to have, but I was just kind of putting it off, was this big ugly stupid airbox. Now, obviously it sticks up, and I can't have that. So I'm either going to have to build a custom airbox or figure something else out. Now, this engine is the same engine they put in the new Legends little, I don't know if they're half scale or whatever they are, little race cars. They used to be a 4-cylinder, 1200 something cc 4-cylinder, but now they're the FC-09 triple. And being that they exist in those race cars, they are custom air boxes. Well, it's not really, they call it an air box, but it's really just an air filter that are made for these engines. Well, I don't have one, but I asked a Facebook group that's all about Legends cars if somebody could measure one for me, and here's what it looks like. Now, I haven't scanned or modeled the hood in here yet, but I still have a feeling that that's going to stick up partially through the hood. And let's see, if we take off this driver's side, and then we rotate it around to this view, you can see there's basically the hood line. It bulges slightly in the center, but not much. So it's definitely going to stick out through the hood. Now, I may end up designing, 3D printing, or somehow making a elbow here similar to the elbow in this airbox. I don't know, 15, 20 degrees, something like that, to push this air filter to rotate it downwards. But I'll just deal with that issue when I come to it. It's kind of my philosophy on this whole car. So that's where we're at. I went ahead and had these engine mounts sent off and cut, and they just got finished today. So technically I could go ahead and put the engine in the car today, except one big problem I forgot about. I don't have my engine hoist or my cherry picker at this shop. That's at the other shop, so that's not going to work. But I also don't have the main bolts yet. I ordered them from McMaster Car. They're going to arrive today at some point. I love McMaster Car. Order it one day, get it the next day. Awesome. So that's where we're at. Engine's moved a little bit. The main reason I moved the engine, like I said, was to get this interference taken care of. And it still has a little interference, as you can see, but this is just a super thin piece of steel that's been glued to the car, which I'm probably going to get rid of and redo. So that little bit of interference isn't a big deal. But before, that much interference was a big deal. So solved one problem, created another with this engine mount situation, but not really a problem. We'll get it taken care of. So I'm excited to actually get this engine in the car and see how it's going to fit in real life. Now, you know, I can see how it fits here, but there's nothing quite like actually physically getting it in the car. If I turn on my sketches here, you can see that I went ahead and I modeled. I'm using a socket head cap screw for an Allen wrench because the head's slightly smaller. But if I turn on the sketch, you can see the diameter of the bolt head and how it's going to interfere with this bolt. So that was the issue that I was going to have had I not made this a slot instead of just a blind hole. So doing that's gonna help clearance wise, and I think it's going to help getting the engine in and out of this car, because you can basically just drop it down into place and it'll lock into place. The other thing I did different than the old engine mounts, it'll take me a second to find them, but let's see. The old engine mounts just came down the frame rail here and stopped. The new ones, I've extended this tab up underneath because the way this engine rotates or wants to rotate under throttle, it's just like if it was in the motorcycle, it'd be wanting to wheelie. So this being the front of the engine is going to want to lift up. So that's going to put this part of the mount in tension. And if it just had this weld here, it's going to want to try to flex this frame rail. But if you wrap it underneath and get some extra weld under here, it's pulling basically in a straight line this direction on this weld, and it's going to stiffen it up quite a bit than trying to actually just flex this flat plane that is the frame rail if you look at it from this side. And you can see how much the engine's been pushed back too versus the old mount. But these little tabs make it a little bit more difficult to get these mounts in place because they key in on top. They key in right here, so they have to slide down, and then they also go underneath. So you can't just slide it in from this direction, and you can't just slide it straight down. But I think they're still going to fit. I haven't actually tried yet. This rear mount, I'm going to have to cut this brake line mount off because I'm going to relocate that. But I think I can just put it in kind of this angle and then rotate the bottom down. This forward mount's going to be a little bit more tricky, but we're going to just see what we can do. I might have to notch a little bit or something, but we'll figure it out. I think this design with wrapping over the top, keying in on this flange, and wrapping underneath is going to make these mounts, they're going to be plenty strong. Oh, and there's something else I forgot about that we're going to show you that I've decided that I'm going to do. So let's turn on the, I guess we'll turn the engine back on. I have this nice machined aluminum plate that is a bulkhead for some kind of open wheel formula car. And I've decided I'm going to put it right here. So if we look at the rest of the front end of the car, that's where it's going to live. You can see these mounts here. Sorry, my computer is a little laggy at the moment. These mounts were originally for a, I don't know what you call it, a wall, a bulkhead, something like that, where the radiator mounts, which is pretty cool. The engine in these cars is really little, really far rearwards. So that's where the radiator is. Well, since I've gone ahead and cut the front off of the car, I need something to stiffen it all back up. I'm going to weld a piece of tubing in here between the frame rails to stiffen it up. But I've had this piece of nice machined aluminum for a while and never knew what to do with it. So I've decided I'm going to actually come in and mount it. So I'll have to design two little sheet metal pieces here to bolt it in. Let's see, I've got it started in here somewhere like this. This is just the rough start of it before I've actually done any work to trim it down. But I think since I'm getting rid of all this front structure, I'm going to have to come up with a new hood latch. But I think I'm going to use this bulkhead and do some, I don't know what you call them, stringers or something that tie into these mounting points that'll be tubular, that'll run forward and support these fenders and the hood catch and all that kind of stuff. So I think that'll be kind of neat. And it'll just be some, I don't know, conversation piece, something to confuse people. Who knows? But might as well use it. It only weighs like 4¼ pounds, so it's not a huge weight addition. I just think it'll be kind of neat. So finally going to use it. So our bolts just showed up, and they fit the engine mounts easy because I gave those a couple thou extra clearance just to give it some wiggle room. And if we go to the engine here, we got a good fit. Just a little bit of slop, but not much. But here's the thing. You try to go all the way through and it locks up. So you try it from the other side. Goes in nice and easy. Locks up. So what's going on here? All right. Same thing with the bottom. So that makes me question, are these bolts straight? Well, if my camera will focus here, let's find out. I know my table is pretty damn flat. Focus, please. Please focus. Okay, so if we roll this bolt, oh, look at that. You can see that light underneath it. I'll spin it. So our bolts, at least this first one I picked out of the bag, are not straight. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. You can see the wobble in it, which I guess, you know, that's kind of understandable. These aren't any kind of precision bolts. Let's see how flat this one is. Or straight it is, sorry. Yep. It's about the same. Might be a little better. So I guess I'm going to attempt to straighten these so I can use them, or I can just slightly drill out the block, the trans on this motorcycle engine. I'm not sure yet. But I got to figure something out because they need to go through. And I'm sure I could hammer it through. But then getting them out is going to be a nightmare. So, at least I do have the bolts now. It's a step in the right direction. Having to straighten them is kind of a pain in the ass though. So tapping the bolts through with a big hammer, and you can see the material transfer. The aluminum there and there. So that shows you too how I can spin it and you can see it too. See it go up and down. And then I got aluminum on the threads, and it actually doesn't take that much effort to tap it through. I say that, it's a big ass hammer. But maybe, just maybe, it'll self-clearance if I do this enough. Who knows? It's kind of filing itself out with the threads. I think I can make it work. Not the end of the world. That's what you get wanting precision. The thing I have to remember in the car is this bolt can stay in the engine because the way these mounts are designed. So that upper bolt can stay, I just have to loosen the nut. The lower bolt does have to go in and out. and it's going to be hard to access the back side of the lower bolt because of the firewall. So I may end up leaving this bolt a good snug tight fit like it is now, and then reaming this one out slightly to make it fit a little bit better. Yet to be determined. I know I'm going to have the engine in and out of this car several times, so if I make it easier to do before I ever put it in, it'll make my life a lot easier in the long run. So we'll see. A little bit of working them back and forth, and I've loosened them up enough to where they're no longer a tight fit. They're just a snug fit. And here's this motor mount in here, just to kind of show you how it goes. Next week, this is going in that. I guarantee it. I promise.